Hi, I'm Crystal, and thank you so much for joining me on the Warrenist Live today, where we celebrate the art, culture, lifestyle, and people of Warren County, North Carolina, and beyond. But before we get started, be sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, do all that good stuff so we can continue to spread all the wonderful things that are happening in our community. Our guest today is Warren County Manager Vincent Jones. So he has this extensive background in working with local government. Some people we just want to introduce him, although he's been here since September 2018.
2018, right?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. So just want to talk with him today, find out what new developments are going on, also to get a better understanding of what his position is within the county. So thank you so much for joining me today, Mr. Jones.
You're welcome. I'm glad to be here.
Okay. All right. So where are you originally from?
I am from right up the road. I was born and raised in Petersburg, Virginia. So I consider myself to be a local. So
Okay.
yeah.
Petersburg. Okay. All right. So tell me about your childhood, some memorable moments shaped you into the person you are today.
Wow, that's interesting. So my childhood was, I think, a normal childhood. I don't have very many war stories from childhood, but I grew up in a tight-knit family. And so both my mother and my father had large families. So a, I had a bunch of uncles and aunts on both sides, which means I also had a lot of cousins. And, I'm a child of the 70s. And so we grew up in the 80s. And so we were always around community and especially our family and extended family of cousins. And so that's how I grew up. And, that's how I was shaped. And my background, church was a big part of growing up for me as well. And so in addition to my large family, I also had a church family that I grew up with. And so I think those two things really do sort of shape my background and who I am today. And I wouldn't have it any other way, quite honestly.
Okay. Now you grew up in a big family. Now, where were you like in placement as far as like siblings?
So yeah, I'm the middle kid. I'm the mean middle kid. So
Mm-hmm. Oh, that explains so much. No, I'm just kidding. No,
come
I'm
on.
just playing. So what type of student were you?
So I was in a student who was considered smart. So back in the day, they would have gifted programs. And so I was in those programs, but I was not performing up to my potential.
Mhm.
And so I was one of those students doing enough to get by, and luckily had teachers and guidance counselors who knew I had way more potential than what I was exhibiting. And so they would make sure that I went to summer enrichment programs
Okay.
and engage me in different ways to keep my attention focused on what it needed to be. Yeah.
Okay. So where did you go to college?
So a couple of places, and so yeah, a couple of places, and so I went to Richard Bland College in Petersburg. I did my first year there, and Richard Bland actually is affiliated with William and Mary, and so if you go there and get a 2-year degree, you're able to go to William and Mary. But I just only did 1 year, and I ended up just applying like any other student to William and Mary, and got accepted there. And that there's actually a real good story behind that I want to share with people. But so I went to William and Mary and finished my degree there for undergrad. And I also went to graduate school. I mean, I decided I wanted to be a city manager, and the degree that you should try to have if you want to be a professionally trained city manager is a public administration degree. And so I got my public administration degree from Florida State University in Tallahassee.
Okay. Now, why did you choose that particular school?
Florida State. So yeah, so when I was looking, so I was younger, and when I was looking at public administration, I was looking at, well, how are these schools ranked? And Florida State's public policy and public administration school was one of the higher ranked schools in the country at the time. And so I also wanted to try another area. My whole life I'd grown up in Virginia, in Petersburg, and so I wanted to move away somewhere else. And so Tallahassee allowed me to do both of those things.
Okay, all right. So was there a culture shock, or what was the biggest like difference between being in Petersburg and being in
So
Florida?
it really was not a big difference. You get exposed to different people. And
Hmm.
so, for example, when I went to Florida, there were a lot of people who looked like me, other minority students. But for example, a lot of them had Caribbean backgrounds, and I hadn't been fully exposed to a lot of that. And so I had a lot of friends that I developed at that point who had Jamaican background, Haitian backgrounds. They were, from the Virgin Islands. And so you just get exposed to a lot of different cultures. But my Florida experience, I think, while Tallahassee is the capital city, it is not Florida's largest city. And so when I left Tallahassee, I ended up living in Orlando for a few years. And so that's where you get, a whole different vibe. And so that was completely different from what I had experienced to that point.
Okay, cool. Now, what sparked your interest in working with in local government?
Well, like I said, I'm from Petersburg, and so if you all are from here, if you go anywhere north of here, most of the time you're on 95 or 85, and you all go through Petersburg. And so Petersburg to me had so much potential. When I was growing up, I mean, you couldn't tell us that that wasn't the best place in the world. But things changed. Like my dad worked at Brown and Williamson cigarette factory, and he was able to work most of our childhood there. But as things changed, the economy changed. Ultimately, that factory ended up closing down, and Petersburg went through some hard times. But the bottom line was, I felt like there was so much potential there, and I was able to see the city manager in Richmond set an example, talk about how he could make improvements. And I felt like really, as far as being an impact on people's quality of life, it's local government. I think we have more impact on people's day to day quality of life than your state government or your federal government, because we're the people that you see. We're the people that you come to rely on for services. And so growing up in Petersburg, thinking that Petersburg had so much potential, I thought that that city manager role would allow me to contribute back to Petersburg. But ultimately, it's tough to work directly at home, especially in these sorts of roles. So I have worked everywhere else but home to this point.
Right, and I was gonna touch on that. Like, so you've been to like your career has taken you to Maryland, Florida, back to Virginia, Illinois, just some of everywhere. So, um, what was it about Warren County? And I think you kind of touched on it too. What was it about Warren County that appealed to you?
Well, that's a good question, right? When I was looking back through my resumes and applications of where I had applied, I was one of those people who early on sort of um, took on this whole idea of reverse migration, where when I was growing up, and even for long periods of Black history, we aspire to those East Coast cities, DC, Philadelphia, New York, which is where my family is, Philadelphia, DC area. And so growing up, I considered, okay, that's where I need to go to have a life. But as I've become an adult, I realized that, that reverse migration is taking place, and people are looking at cities that offer a good quality of life, like Charlotte, like Raleigh, like Atlanta. And I always like this area. And I'm considering, when I'm talking about this, I mean like the Raleigh and Durham area, which I consider us to be a part of. And so I had applied in this area. for a few different places, and Warren County was the best opportunity that came up for me. So I was happy, and I'm closer here in Warren County than I was to my parents at some point when I was even in Virginia. So
Oh, okay. All right.
yeah.
Now, can you share your story about when you first came to Warren County, who you met, and talk about that?
Absolutely. I love to tell this story because I'm not sure if many people know it. But when I came to Warren County, my first time, I was like, okay, I saw the position and I thought, you know what, let me go and make sure this is somewhere I would be comfortable working and living. And so I just drove down one day. And when I was in downtown Warrenton, I saw this young lady had a nice bike, that was like, one of those things that you should be envious of. And so I was like, that lady is probably somebody I should talk to. And that lady turned out to be Miss Jerry Ann King. And, she gave me the greatest overview of Warren County, some of the issues we were facing. She actually took me into the Hendrick House, gave me some background on the quilters, and it really did open my eye. And so it just enhanced what I was able to see when I came here exploring on my own, because I didn't know anybody here. But that really did help solidify, that this is a position that I'm going to apply for. And so, yeah, I owe it to Miss Jerry Ann for giving me that background. That was the spark that made me go ahead and apply for the position here.
That's awesome. And I
It
mean,
is.
I've only known for maybe about 6 years, but I've learned so much about Warren County. And this is I'm from here, made and
Okay.
raised here. And so I've learned so much from her that I'm like, I went right through the school system. I didn't know any of this stuff. Between
Right.
like her and Miss Jane Ballgroom, I learned so much about this area, and I greatly appreciate it. And they definitely were the propelled me to even be doing this right now. So
All right, way to go.
yeah, absolutely. So okay, so those who don't know, how does one really become a county manager? Like, what are your responsibilities? What can you do? What can't you do?
Okay. So that is a great question. To me, that really is, I know I gave you a hard time about doing this interview because I really do like to I really do like to sort of stay in the background. I am not an elected official. And so we have different roles. And so, but they are my bosses. I report to them. And so the county manager reports directly to our board of commissioners. And so it's 5 of them. And so my role is as the county manager to, one, if the commissioners discuss different policies that they want the county to implement, I am the person who helps implement those policies, but I am also the person responsible for running the day-to-day organization. And so I have at this point about 13 direct reports that are department directors that report to me. So in addition to those 13 directors, there are 5 departments that the county as an organization supports, but they don't report to me directly. But they get service from the county. We pay bills for DSS and the health department and elections, and then the sheriff's office. The sheriff is a completely separately elected position, but his staff gets paid through finance. Their bills come through our finance office. And so my job really is, and I'll use this just as an example, it is really to serve as the CEO of Warren County as a organization. And so we have a $36 million budget. And so I'm responsible for making sure that when the board approves a budget, when they approve policies, that we implement them and that we start marching down that road to make sure that we are providing services to our residents. And so I hope that was a good overview. But yeah, so I'm here on a daily basis, like I said, and I'll just go through like what my day looks like. So this morning, for example, I came in the door and had a meeting with finance talking about our payroll policies and procedures. And from there, I was able to take a quick breath and go into another meeting with staff, and that was with economic development, the county attorney, the tax administrator, and our public works director, talking about an economic development project. Um, and so from there, again, I was able to run then to another meeting where we had some folk who were interested in looking at a piece of county property. And so if it's government property, it's not on the tax roll, it's not generating revenue. And so they wanted to take a look at that property. And so I went out to be a part of that appointment where we showed them that property. And that led me up until where I am now with this interview with you, and and then my afternoon looks the same way. But no one day is ever the same. But there are things that I have to do every day, like take a look at our bills, sign off on checks, and then I have to find some time to sort of plan for what is it that we're going to work on for the next year, because I mean, this is a critical time for us. Our new fiscal year starts at the end of this week. And so it's time for us to get started and rolling again, with working on different projects that we need to accomplish over the next fiscal year.
Okay. All right.
So,
Now I'm trying to figure out how to quite phrase this, but now as a county manager, someone who has worked in all these other areas with much larger budgets than Warren County, you said it's $36 million here. How, okay, knowing what your limits are as far as your responsibilities and your tasks,
sure.
and also your resources compared to these other areas, how do you handle that from a professional standpoint? Like, how do you still get to hope to make some of your goals a reality?
Right. Right.
Yeah. So,
Okay. All right. So a couple of different things. And so um, you're going to experience, whether it's a larger budget or a smaller budget, you still have to be able to provide services within that level of budgeting. And so you really just sort of look at the scale of what you're working with. And so if I had a larger budget, our recreation department might be 50 people. We don't have that, but we still need to provide services. And so you really just look at how can you scale those services based on the resources you have. And so, and that's a good question that you raised, quite honestly, because you asked like, what am I able to do versus what am I not able to do? And I am considered the budget officer. So that's why creating a budget annually is such a big deal for me and for the county, because it's one of the responsibilities I have from the North Carolina statutes, but it's usually a part of your role as a manager, whether you're a city manager or a county manager. And so that leads to how things get to the Board of Commissioners. So I'm responsible for paying bills and paying projects. But if we have a project that goes over $50,000, we have a system of checks and balances in place. I have to bring that to the board for approval. And so that's, so I can't just go out and just spend on whatever I want to spend. The checks and balances is that I have to bring that to the board for their approval, their review, and explain to not only them, but to the public, this is how we're conducting business. This is why we are doing things the way we are. So.
okay. Now, under your leadership, what are some things that you've initiated, things you have accomplished? Tell us about that.
Okay. So there's a lot, and I'm just going to pick a few things. But what I want to do during my time here in Warren County is really sort of help modernize our government operations. And so while we are a rural county, I do think that people's expectations are the same, right? So when we watch the news, we see what's happening in Vance County, Franklin County, Wake County, and Durham County. And so our residents, to me, have expectations of the same thing taking place here in Warren County. And so they don't go, oh, we're a rural county, and so we don't want that service. They go, okay, well, we need to have the same thing here. And so, I hope that we can sort of modernize how we do business, for example. It's things like credit cards, for example. You might be able to pay your tax bill with the credit card or a debit card, but if you go over to the planning department and try to get a permit, you can't do it there. And so, you're more likely to go and interact with the planning department and need a credit card or want to use your debit card there than the tax office. And so, trying to look at our services, one, and seeing how we can modernize them and just help people sort of understand how we do business. And so, when you ask like some of the things that we've done, so last year, I'm not sure many people know about it, but we didn't have a budget book until last this fiscal year. And so what we would do is after the budget was approved, we would put up just our line item budget information. It didn't explain what the department was, what are the services they provide, how many people are in that department. And so all that is now available to our residents. You can go on our website, go to the finance office and look at our fiscal year 21 budget book. And we're going to do the same for next year, and that we hope that it starts a trend of people feel like they're having more access to what it is that we do. I mean, everything we do is public. And so I don't want anyone to feel like what we're doing here is not open to them. Yes, we do have to handle some things confidentially, but eventually those things become public. And so if we're handling things confidentially, it is because we need to sort of protect the integrity of the project. But ultimately, like I said, everything we do is public and available, for public inspection. So the budget book, for example, I mean, a neat thing that we were able to do is the pool at Seoul City was closed before I got here. And while you might think that's a small thing, it was a huge thing. I mean, the commissioners were adamant that we get that pool open, and we spent right around $100,000 doing that. But if you were to go to Seoul City right now and that pool is open and it's full of kids, it will immediately let you know that it was worth the effort and investment that it took to get that pool back open. We were able to this project before I arrived started, but when I got here, we had to finish up the last bit of construction for our EMS headquarters. So we have a brand new EMS building, and so we had to finish up that construction and then figure out a plan for moving our EMS staff over to the new building and putting in place some policies for how we take care of that building. So I'm happy that that was able to be accomplished. We have finished installing sewer up at our I-85 interchange in Wise, and that was initiated by a grant, but we didn't have enough money. And so when I got here, we were able to budget additional money to complete that project. We've actually now finished the project. And so what that does is, if you notice, we don't have a lot of businesses on our interchanges on I-85.
Right.
So we hope that that will allow us now to have the infrastructure in place so businesses would be willing to go there. And we're seeing that interest being expressed already. But I will wrap up and say the most significant accomplishment, I think, has happened recently with the budget that was approved. And the board approved some reorganizations of our departments. And I think that's significant in how we do business. And I think it will better allow us to focus on customer service and how we provide service to our customers, and it will allow me to be better as a manager. So I'm having some, 13 to 15 people reporting to me directly. And now with the reorganization, that gets cut down to 8 to 10, and I can make sure that I'm now focusing on, my role as a leader. How do we get people professionally developed? How do we make sure that we have succession plans in place? And how do we now focus on customer service and look at employee morale? So it's complicated, but it's also interesting.
Okay, and that was actually something I wanted to touch on too, so I'm glad you brought it up. The reorganization now, as a citizen of Warren County, will I notice a difference as far as like where I would go to handle a matter, or how would that look to
Right.
us?
So no, you shouldn't. Most of it is internal, and so but to the public, it may appear as a different department, but the services will be the same. And so, for example, the first one I'll talk about is public works. We had a separate public works department and a separate buildings and grounds department.
Okay.
So I'm not sure people knew that, quite honestly. And so our public works department ran. The county has a landfill. And so it's not taking your household waste. It's taking your other waste and your green waste, your yard waste. And we also have convenience centers. And so Public Works Department is responsible for that. Buildings and Grounds is responsible for keeping our county facilities in good shape, making sure the maintenance is done on our buildings as well as like our landscaping. And so those two departments will be combined into a public works department. And so that doesn't necessarily impact the public, but nothing as far as our convenience centers or the landfill operations will change because of that. It will better be able to have us provide service sort of internally. There is a little bit of cost savings. And then we also get to have an assistant director in place so we can have succession planning for that department, for example.
Okay.
Um, yeah. I could talk more about it if you want me to.
Well, I mean, I don't know what kind of time you have, but we'll move on for this time.
Sure,
But
sure.
while we're on the topic of money, the American Rescue Act.
Yes.
So what, more than $9 billion was in direct assistance is being given to the state of North Carolina. Is that correct?
So
Um,
it's actually in the hundreds of millions, if not billions of
oh,
dollars.
okay.
Say right, right,
Okay. So, how much is Warren County getting, and are there any plans in place for that?
right. And so it's the American Rescue Plan, and so we are projected to get $3.8 million directly to Warren County. And so, no, we just got the guidelines released from the federal government on last week. It talks about what we can and can use it for, but the objective is if your county has been impacted by the pandemic, we have been under a pandemic for over a year operating. And so there was an expectation that we would have less revenue. It would impact businesses because of the stay-at-home order, and those things did in fact happen. But we have received this funding to help us continue to recover from the negative impact of the pandemic. And so, no, because we were in the middle of our budget process when this all started, the Board of Commissioners agreed that what we would do is this summer we would talk about what our plan looks like
Okay.
for those funds. And so we'll be working on that this summer. And
Okay.
that's just funds that Warren County is getting directly. That doesn't count funding that schools will be getting directly.
Okay. All right.
Right.
So to go back a little bit, we were talking about the pandemic, and just my opinion, the pandemic just showed, as far as Warren County in our rawest state, the good and the bad. What would you say were some positives that came out of the pandemic?
Wow. The positives to me definitely outweigh the negatives for sure.
Okay.
And so for me, it was seeing how the community sort of pitched in to take care of each other. I was
Mhm.
certainly proud of our Warren County staff because one, we didn't ever shut down in providing services because as government workers, really most of us are considered essential. And so while we did allow some of our staff to work remotely, what I was really pleased in seeing is how, like I said, the community came together. And where it showed up for me was um, in addressing this issue of food insecurity that we've had. And so we were really concerned about how are we going to help our residents who may have been impacted, who may have lost a job, and how are we going to now help them make sure that they, had access to food, not only food but healthy food. And so it was awesome to see our community pitch in to help out. And so our local food bank is Loaves and Fishes, right?
Mhm.
And so I don't think that they ever could have imagined how impactful they would be in helping our residents. And so, I mean, I was actually able to go over there and, help them distribute food to our residents. But the community came forward. The community was donating food. Our employees, we actually had a food drive. And so, and then you had like our Baptist church associations, they were holding food drives and feeding the community. And so it was really, really a great thing to see. Not only do we talk about community and how close knit the community is here, but it was actually good to see that put in action. And so the negative really is we saw that there is a disparity between those who have access to Wi-Fi and those who don't. And it wasn't just here in Warren County. It was all across the country that you saw that. And so it's still a challenge that we're trying to work on. And so there that's definitely a priority that the Board of Commissioners has given me as the county manager. But and we're working as hard as we can to try to see what we can do. But as you know, I mean, broadband is a service that's provided by the private market. And so while I wish we had the authority to make somebody do business here, we don't. We can't just say Comcast, Spectrum, do business here. They do business where they can make the most money. And so, but what our board has allowed me to do is to tell those companies, look, Warren County has resources that we're willing to put behind you to be able to expand your network here. And so we have actually done that, but still, ultimately, they have to pull the trigger unless we get some additional authority from our state legislature, and they allow us to go in and build, that infrastructure. If we were to build it now, we couldn't operate it. We would have to still turn it over to a private company. And so, we feel like we are close, but that's still an area where we need some additional work. And believe me, we are working on it.
Right, that I certainly hope so. As far as like, well, I have two children, both in Warren County schools, so I have Wi-Fi in my home, but it's not great. And so the schools did their part in, helping, as far as the virtual learning. But a question I do want to ask about with Warren County schools, and you talked about departments and other people that are reporting to you or the county assists. What's the relationship between Warren County government and Warren County schools?
Sure. I think it's a good relationship.
Okay.
So, of course, there's always going to be some tension, for example, when it's budget season and we provide a large portion of our local dollars. It's the largest part of our budget we provide in funding to Warren County schools. And so there may be tension because they might want more funding than we can provide. But we we meet with them sort of regularly, to talk about issues. And it's one of the things that the board is actually asked us to do is to set up regular meetings between the county board of commissioners and the board of education so that we aren't just having a conversation around budget time where we're trying to figure out how to divvy up resources. And so, I had a good working relationship with the superintendent, and I expect the same to happen now with the interim superintendent. And so I know that the Board of Education members talk to our Board of Commissioners, and so I think that there is a good working relationship. Yeah. And so I'm looking forward to continuing that.
Okay, but they don't report to you that, but it's just a
Absolutely
report.
right. They do not report to me. They don't report to the Board of Commissioners. So we provide them money, and sort of technically we can't actually sort of tell them how to use that money. But because of the relationship and because they know we are the source of a significant portion of their budget, so we have to be able to work together and agree on how certain things should be handled. But they are separately elected. The superintendent reports to the school board. So yeah.
Okay. Um, Now, just recently I saw some photos from Seoul City. So there was some developments going on there. So can you talk a little bit more about that?
Sure.
Okay.
So yeah, we are excited. So we have had a developer who has shown interest in developing some um, single family stick built homes here in the county. And I mean, that's a significant investment, and it's exactly what we want to see here in the county. And so the reason this came up recently is because I'm not sure if everyone knows, but it's part of the Seoul City legacy. The plans were put in place for there to be um, additional housing. There were roads constructed, and those roads have deteriorated since nothing was built over there. There are a few homes on one part of that area that was created for that housing. But yeah, so we have a developer who is interested in building out that neighborhood. And because the roads have been deteriorated, the property owner has asked that there be an assessment put in place, which means we would build the streets, but the property owners would pay for it through the assessment process. So when the homes get built, they'll have their property tax bill, or even without, they will have a special assessment on their property tax bill that will pay for the improvements. We think it's a benefit because the county will get a completely brand new neighborhood offering some options for people who currently work here. For example, our EMS workers, our teachers, our International Paper Plant, or Glen Raven folk who may want to live closer to where they work. So it's exciting to see, and it was exciting to be a part of those conversations that lead up to helping somebody, make that decision to invest in the county. And I think that the developer felt comfortable investing in Warren County because they see the good things that are happening here, and the potential that we have here in the county.
Okay. All right. And then also there was a Q&A a couple weeks ago where the public could come in, ask questions. And one of the things that actually caught my attention was the a community center.
Okay.
That was news to me. The only community center I know about is the one on West Franklin Street. So what is that about?
Wow. Okay. So, all right. So you were taking notes, huh?
Of course.
All right. So the commissioners had a Q&A session where they just invited residents in before one of our board meetings so they could just ask questions. And I think what you're talking about is we were talking really about our um, what's called our capital improvement budget, where we talk about long-term building needs for the county, projects that could probably take multiple years to implement. And so one of the things that the board approved in the budget was for us to begin some design work on a community center here for Warren County. It's one of the things I've heard since I've gotten here from the commissioners, from our residents. They want a community center, they want an indoor pool. Our current gym doesn't have air conditioning. And so the first step in being able to build something like that is, well, let's figure out what that looks like. Let's get a community center design. That way we know what we want to have as amenities. We know how much it will cost, and then we could start trying to figure out, how do we pay for that. But the first step is let's get it designed for Warren County and the needs of Warren counties. And so I'm excited by that, and I think it's a big accomplishment for the board to get that project moved forward.
Okay. Is there a designated area for that yet, or?
No, I mean, so that's one of the things that we will look at, where is a good site? Of course we would look at land that the county owns, but if there's a better location that we need to have it to make it more centrally located and accessible to residents, then that will be a part of the discussion. And so we will have to get feedback from our residents as we go through that design process. So keep an eye out for that.
I sure will, most
Right,
definitely. Okay,
right.
now we talked about with the residents, we talked about businesses coming here. Now, what about the existing businesses? Is there anything in place to assist those? I've seen, a few businesses close during the pandemic.
Right.
What can be done?
So, so economic development is an area that we are working on. So we are now going to have a combined community and economic development department
Okay,
where the focus is on community building as well as economic development. And so for existing businesses, what that means is we're trying to expand what we can offer existing businesses. And so that's called, excuse me, excuse me, that's called business retention.
okay,
How do you retain those existing businesses? And so we have been limited in sort of funds that we have, but we are a part of Council of Governments. We are part of the Qatar Council of Governments. And so they have had some loan programs that have been available for existing businesses. And I know that some people were hesitant to take on additional debt. But what happens is now, some of those loans have turned into forgivable loans.
okay,
And so I would encourage existing businesses to at least find out about, what's available to them. Um, Now, you also asked earlier about the American Rescue Plan. And so it is my understanding, we still have to do some more research on it, that there may be some additional opportunity that we didn't have previously
okay,
that might allow us to offer some grants of some sort to existing businesses. But they will have to be comfortable with having discussions with us about their operating expenses and revenue and costs to make sure that they're going to be eligible if we're able to offer something like that. A lot of times people will feel like as a private business owner, they don't want to divulge some of that information to us as a government. But when we're using public resources, we have to be able to justify and explain, eligibility, et cetera. So,
okay. And also while we're on the topic of businesses, there was a public hearing last week involving the Point, which is a restaurant in the Lake Gaston area.
yes.
Can you talk more about what that entailed and the results?
Sure, sure. So you know what? That's one of the things I didn't even think of mentioning when you were asking about my responsibilities. But the county has a noise ordinance, and so the noise ordinance is not absolute. The noise ordinance has in it an opportunity for people if they know that they may need a variance because they have an event that's going to require them to make more noise. Then we think would be acceptable. In the ordinance, it allows people to apply for a temporary permit, and that's perfectly normal. And so, one of my responsibilities as the manager is to sit on what's called the noise permit. I'm sure I'm not getting the name right, but it's the noise permit control board, for example. And it's me, the sheriff, or his designee, and the health director or their designee. And so, what happens is and you see this all over the place. If people have events, they usually have to apply for permits. And so what the Point did was they applied for a permit. They want to have live music and bands in the evenings on the weekend because that helps them generate business. And after a certain time, the noise needs to be below a certain level, or you are considered to be in violation of the noise ordinance unless you have a permit that allows you to exceed those noise levels. And so they did just that. They asked for a permit to be able to exceed those levels until 12:15 a.m. And so they had to follow the lower noise level until 12. And so we had them present, and because it's a public meeting, we have to let people know that it's happening. So people came and said that they were not in favor of them getting a permit, and so we had to hear those discussions, and the noise permit board decided to allow the point to have the permit. And then our ordinance also allows an appeal process. And so some people took us up on that appeal process. So that's what you saw the other week, was us having a public hearing based on the criteria that's in our noise ordinance. So it followed exactly what the noise ordinance required us to do. And so there you got to see both sides. You got to see the point talk about why it was important for them to have the permit, and you got to see those who were not supportive talk about the impact on them. And so ultimately, Board of Commissioners made the decision to allow the point to continue with the permit. And what they did was they raised the debt level that would allow them to continue to have their events. And so it really was interesting to see how that played out, because on one hand, you have what you want to see, which is there's new development at the lake. And so it's bringing in some new people who are experiencing Warren County differently than those of us who have been here for a while. And so you have to figure out, how do you balance those things? What do we consider to be the existing culture of Warren County? And then how do you integrate newcomers into that? So it was a good problem to have.
Okay. All right. So, and one question, I was actually sent this through a DM. And I know you've heard this question before, but when is Warrenton getting a grocery store?
When is Warrenton getting a grocery store? So if I could answer that question, I could tell you I'd probably be a rich person by now. So can I ask you a couple of questions?
Go ahead.
All right. So what do you think our role is as a county government in getting a grocery store to Warrenton? And then I'll follow up with my response.
Okay. See, I'm not used to being interrogated. Let me get the light. No, I'm just kidding. I would say it's probably from the the economic development department.
I'll jump in and save you.
Okay. Please do.
So you're right. It's more than in economic development, but that's how we have handled it. And so again, it's one of those things. I can assure everybody who is listening or who will view this in the future, Warren County is supportive of an additional grocery store. So right now we have 2, and so it does cause me a little bit of heartburn when I hear people say we don't have a grocery store, because we do have 2, but the issue is we don't have one right in the county seat, which is the town of Warrenton, where people are used to having one close by. And so I know that our economic development director, Ms. Duncan, has spoken with grocery store operators. Her and I have driven to Dunn to go to, grocery store headquarters to talk to them about their ability to open up a store here in Warren County. Our commissioners, I think, are open, to making sure that we'd be supportive of someone who wanted to open a grocery store here. But ultimately, it's not our decision. Those are private businesses. And again, it goes back to what can they make a case for as a successful business. And they, to this point, don't think that they can have a successful grocery store operation based on the number of people that we have here in town and who would use the grocery store. And so we're trying to convince people otherwise, and it's an uphill battle. But we are having those conversations, even though, like the odds are stacked against us. That has not prevented us from having those conversations with people. And so we are having those conversations. We will continue to talk to any and everybody about a grocery store. And so we just haven't been able to find a solution that's been one that's feasible for us. But that doesn't mean we're not trying or that we won't continue to try. But we can't just say grocery store, come to Warrenton, come to Warren County. If we could, we would have done that months ago.
Right, right. I knew that. I just wanted to make sure you look good for this.
Way to go.
How do you see?
Teamwork.
Right, right. So how do you see Warren County moving forward at this point?
So I think Warren County moving forward, for me, as the manager, that means that we have an organization that's working well, right? And so that I don't get complaints about, coming to the county manager's office and I didn't get good service, or one of our other departments and I didn't get good service. And so there's a lot of the stuff that I have to work on. It's not the stuff that's visible to people. But hopefully what they realize is when they go to the library, they're getting good services. When it's time for their kids to have some recreation program, we will have improved our recreation program. So our families are looking at, I can have activities for my kids or adults. We'll have activities that they can enjoy themselves. And so that means, one, that we are providing great service to people, that our services are efficient, to our residents, and then that we're starting to see people recognize the value that's in Warren County. So we're not trying to change the fabric of Warren County. Do we want development on our interchange? Absolutely. That impacts all of us. If we can get development at the interchanges, it impacts revenue that we have that will allow us to offer more to folk who want to build broadband or be more supportive of schools. And so if we can have some community building here where we get to sort of keep our hometown, small town feel here, but we also take advantage of what's considered to be our assets, and that, everybody in the county feels like they are part of the Warren County story. And it's not just for tourism. We're talking about one section of the county and not the other. I want everybody to feel like the county, from the northern end to the southern end, are part of a prosperous sort of unit here. Then that's Warren County, that it represents all of us, not just one section over the other.
Okay, all right. So, and I'm gonna do one personal question, and I'm gonna leave it alone. Okay.
Okay.
So once you take off the county manager hat, what is something you enjoy doing?
Wow. I don't know. I'm not sure if I take off the county manager hat, can I get away with that? It's a 24/7 job.
Good answer.
No, I do try to spend time with my friends. Can I do a better job of that? Absolutely. And so I play tennis. I'm trying to do a better job of getting into the gym. And I absolutely love music. And so I'm so glad that things have opened back up. And so if there's a outdoor concert or venue, with some good music, I'm there. And so I haven't had a vacation in a while because we've been under the pandemic. And so I'm looking forward to traveling and just being able to take a quick break. But, there's always work to be done. Like my board of commissioners might be listening, so I'll keep it nice here. So
okay, all right. They're not watching. No,
there's always work to be done, and so I try to make sure that we stay on top of things. But I want to set the example. It's important that you find a good balance between your work and your life, and I'm trying to do better about that.
Okay, yeah, like self-care.
Absolutely.
All right. So to learn more about what's taking place in Warren County, specifically the government, where can we look?
So you can visit our Warren County website, Warren County. It's warrencountync.com. We also have a Facebook page as well. And so we're trying to do better about social media. And so those are some of the ways you can best stay tuned to what's going on. We try to put notices on our website. If something is an emergency, we'll actually do like a robocall about it. And so we just want to encourage people, that we are here. We are open. And if you hear things about Warren County as an organization, that I want people to feel empowered enough that if it doesn't sound quite right, they can pick up the phone and call here, and we can help them figure out what exactly is going on, what exactly is it that we are doing, because ultimately we're here to provide service for those of us who live here in Warren County.
All right. So thank you so much, Mr. Jones. See, it wasn't too bad. I'm nice.
It was, and I appreciate it. I appreciate you taking it easy on me.
Yeah, no problem, no problem. But definitely come back again because there's always something going on. So I would love for you to come back on Warrenist Live so we could discuss it and share it with the community.
Awesome.
So
I appreciate the opportunity.
yeah, absolutely. So thank you all so much for tuning in. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. I'm on LinkedIn too, at the Warrenist. I hope everyone has a wonderful day, and I will see you all soon. All right, bye.
Take care.